Hello everyone, welcome to Arvind Academy's Polity classes. These polity classes are highly relevant for any competitive exam that has Indian polity as its syllabus. The syllabus of these classes is designed in such a framework that these classes are going to be highly useful for civil services prelims exam, group 1, group 2, police constable, sub-inspector and other competitive exams. One small announcement, Arvind Academy has launched online classes and online test series for aspirants of Telangana, group 1, group 2, sub-inspector and police constable. So interested aspirants, if any queries, please contact Arvind Academy. The contact details will be provided in the description box of this video. Also join Arvind Academy Telegram channel to enhance your preparation, and also subscribe to Arvind Academy YouTube channel so that you get the notifications of all the new videos that are being uploaded by Arvind Academy. In the previous classes, we have learnt about the definition of constitution, constitutional law, constitutionalism, what is limited government. Today, in this class, we are going to learn about historical background or historical evolution of Indian Constitution. Historical background or historical evolution of Indian Constitution. The Indian Constitution that we have today has started commencing since 26th January 1950. 26th January 1950. Since then, Indian Constitution has started commencing. So the 1950 Indian Constitution has not developed in a decade or overnight or in a single day. The 1950 Indian Constitution, as the title itself suggests, it has a historical background. It has evolved over many decades. And when we talk about historical background, it is nothing but talking about the developments between the period 1773 and 1950. 1773 to 1950. The developments between this period is called as historical background or historical evolution of Indian Constitution. So what is this 1950? As I told you, commencement of Indian Constitution. I am going to discuss about this in the later classes. Indian Constitution got adopted on 26th November 1949. 26th November 1949 is also called as Indian Constitution Day. Adoption of Constitution. Commencement of Constitution is 26th January 1950. And what is this 1773? It is a very important year, as it has witnessed a landmark legislation called as 1773 Regulating Act. 1773 Regulating Act. This act was enacted by British Parliament. Through this act, the British Parliament has regulated the activities of East India Company in India. In the sense that the British Parliament has started indirect rule in India through East India Company since 1773, and hence 1773 is a very important year, as it has witnessed a landmark legislation called as 1773 Regulating Act. So when I speak about historical background of Indian Constitution, which means that developments between the period 1773 and 1950. Now, British Parliament has enacted, and those are being followed in India. So what has led to the development of 1773 Regulating Act? What events have resulted in enactment of 1773 Regulating Act? So now the class is about learning those things that led to 1773 Regulating Act inaction by the British Parliament. Historically, if you see, India has been a trading destination for many European countries in ancient era and in medieval era also. Likewise, in modern times, in 1498 AD, 1498 AD, a Portuguese ruler, Vasco da Gama, he is a Portuguese traveler. He had discovered a sea route to India. Sea route to India from Europe via Atlantic Ocean. So in 1498 AD, Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese traveler, discovered sea route to India from Europe to India via Atlantic Ocean. I'll show you the picture. So this is the picture. This is the picture. See, from Portugal, from Western Europe, Europe to India via Atlantic Ocean. Vasco da Gama has discovered a sea route. He has arrived at Calicut, which is on Malabar coast. So Vasco da Gama, discovering sea route to India from Europe via Atlantic Ocean, he landed at Calicut, which is on Malabar coast. The local ruler, King Jamorin, welcomed him. Vasco da Gama bought few goods in India and then sold it back in his own country and earned huge profits. So getting motivated, the Portuguese established a company. The Portuguese in the year 1500 AD. The Portuguese in the year 1500 AD has established a company known as Estado da India. Estado da India. In 1500 AD. So the company's Portuguese company name is Estado da India. Portuguese company name is Estado da India in the year 1500 AD. It has established its first settlement in Calicut. What is this settlement? First settlement in Calicut. What do you mean by settlement? Settlement is nothing but a factory. To further simplify it, it is a trading center. So, in 1500 AD, the Portuguese company known as Estado da India has established its first settlement in Calicut. And for the next 100 years, the Portuguese exclusively had done the trade with India and earned huge profits. Motivated by the success and profits, a group of English merchants known as Adventurers Group getting motivated by the success and the profits that the Portuguese had earned, a group of English merchants known as Adventurers Group, they have established a company known as East India Company in 1599 AD. So East India Company was established in 1599 AD. In 1600 AD, to be precisely 31st December 1600 AD, East India Company secured a royal charter. From Queen Elizabeth, from the then British Queen, Queen Elizabeth I. So the East India Company, which was established in the year 1599 AD, it has secured a royal charter from the then Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth I. What is this royal charter? This royal charter was signed by Queen Elizabeth I, providing the exclusive rights to East India Company to trade with the East for the next 15 years. Royal Charter has given an exclusive trading rights to whom? To East India Company. For what? To trade with the East, which also includes India. When? On 31st December 1600 AD. Exclusive trading rights is also called as trade monopoly, which means that no other company from England would do the trade with the East except East India Company, and East India Company got this right through a royal charter signed by the then Queen Elizabeth I to do the exclusive trade with the East that also includes India. Hence, British came to India in 1600 AD as traders. Remember this word. British came to India in 1600 AD as traders in the form of East India Company. So this can be a potential question. British came to India in 1600 AD to trade with India in the form of East India Company. So in what form they came? They came as traders, and then they ended up becoming rulers. What must have been the events that led to the transformation from dramatic transformation from traders to territorial rulers? Let us see that. Let us see about Royal Charter. So this Royal Charter was signed by Queen Elizabeth I, right? It has given exclusive rights for the East India Company to trade with the East, including India, for the next 15 years. What does this consist of? This consists of constitution, powers, privileges of East India Company. This Royal Charter consisted of Constitution of East India Company, which means that political structure, the structure of East India Company, powers given to East India Company, and the privileges of East India Company. Let us see the Constitution. Every year, one governor and 24 one-man committees to be elected to manage East India Company, in the sense that the management of East India Company, is done by these 25 men in England. So the management of East India Company was done by these 25 men in England, and these 25 men included one governor and 24 one-man committees. Subsequently, these 24 one-man committees came to be called as directors. Hence, Court of Directors was born. Court of Directors. So, Court of Directors and the governor, they manage East India Company from England. So, that's what Constitution. The governor has been given the power. The governor has been given the power to issue ordinances for the good governance of East India Company, for regulating the activities of East India Company, and also for maintaining the discipline of public servants working under East India Company. But the power given to governor is limited power. Who has given him the power? The Royal Charter, signed by Queen Elizabeth I, has given the governor the power to issue ordinances for good governance of the East India Company, and also regulating the activities and maintaining the discipline of public servants working in East India Company. But the power of the governor is limited, because he can issue ordinances, but they should not be in contrary to the British laws, conventions and precedents. So his power is limited. So we have seen the Constitution, that is structure of East India Company, and then the powers of East India Company, and then privileges. Now let us see its settlements. So we have seen East India Company 1600 AD came to India as traders. They have established their first settlement in 1608 in Surat. It is trade point of transit. Trade point of transit. So the settlement at Surat is trade point of transit, established in the year 1608. I told you the Portuguese were already existing as traders then, and the Portuguese were dominating the west coast. Hence, East India Company had started focusing on East Coast. As a part of it, East India Company has established its second settlement, 1610. Second settlement in Machilipatnam. In Machilipatnam, which is a part of Coromandel Coast. And this Machilipatnam establishment was the first establishment of East India Company in South India. Let us see how East India Company is progressing. Please note down all the years, everything that's being told, because these are all potential questions for the prelims, group 1, group 2 and even group 2 mains also. Now, in the year 1612, Sir Thomas Roe, in the year 1612, Sir Thomas Roe, he has managed to secure exclusive rights. He has managed to secure exclusive rights to reside and set up factories, in Surat. In 1612, Sir Thomas Roe, who was an ambassador to the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, he managed to secure exclusive rights to reside and set up factories in Surat. So the then Mughal Emperor Jahangir gave these rights. Hence, for the first time, East India Company got a territorial base. For the first time East India Company got a territorial base in mainland India. So in 1600 AD they came as traders to getting a territorial base in mainland India. See how the developments are taking place, how the Britishers are becoming dominant. This is in the year 1612. Earlier, as I told you, the Royal Charter was for 15 years. The 1638 Charter, it has empowered the East India Company to declare wars and enter into treaties. The 1638 Charter has empowered East India Company to declare wars and enter into treaties, subject to one condition. The territories that are being acquired during wars, the East India Company cannot assume sovereignty over them. No sovereignty. The territories that are being acquired by them would belong to English Crown, and East India Company was nothing but a representative of English Crown. So East India Company can get into wars, get into treaties, but it cannot assume sovereignty over the acquired territories. Those territories belong to the English Crown, and East India Company is its representative. 1669 Charter is very important because 1669 Charter 1669 Charter has entrusted the Bombay Port . 1669 Charter has entrusted the Bombay Port and the territory to East India Company for some annual rent, and also it has empowered the governor to issue ordinances and to make laws for the good governance of Bombay territory and its people. Bombay territory and its people. The governor has been empowered by 1669 Charter. Hence, they started becoming rulers. For the first time, they started becoming rulers. See, traders to having territorial base in India and then now making rules for the territories that are in India. Look at the way East India Company is growing. Now, 1672 Charter has empowered the East India Company to mint their own coins. So if you see, the East India Company's powers are being gradually enhanced, and the East India Company is becoming gradually dominant. Now that it is acquiring territories, it has its own army, it is managing troops, it is indulging, it is forming alliances, it is indulging wars, and then exercising civil and criminal jurisdiction in the acquired territories in India. So East India Company is becoming dominant and dominant and dominant. By 1700, the East India Company has established many settlements and established 3 chief factories and established chief settlements or chief factories in Bombay, Calcutta and Madras. By 1700, East India Company has established many settlements and established chief factories in Bombay, Calcutta and Madras, and these chief factories became walled forts. Example, Fort St. George. Fort St. George in Madras, Fort Williams in Bengal. Fort Williams in Bengal. So the examples, these can be potential bits. Where is Fort St. George located? Established by East India Company. Where is Fort Williams? So these are all potential bits. Please make a note of everything that I am writing on the board, right? Yes. So by 1700, chief factories were established in Bombay, Calcutta and Madras, and hence each place has its own headquarters. So Bombay headquarters, Calcutta headquarters and Madras headquarters. Each headquarter had a governor. And these are also called as presidencies. In the year 1726, because of this 1726 charter, this has given or empowered the governors. This has empowered the governors to make ordinances, to make laws for good governance of these 3 presidencies, in the sense that the governor can rule all the establishments and settlements in those acquired territories. So how they transformed into rulers. So 1726 charter gave the governor to rule over the territories in India, in Bombay, Calcutta, Madras presidencies. Now, as I told you, the initial royal charter was for 15 years and it gave only limited powers. But in the subsequent charters, if you see, the powers given to East India Company have been increased. And now that the governor has every right to rule over all the settlements in the acquired territories in India. In 1717, the Mughal Emperor Farrukh Siyar, the Mughal Emperor Farrukh Siyar he has given a royal firman to East India Company for customs free trade. Customs free trade in the regions Bengal, Gujarat, Deccan for an annual rental payment of 10,000 rupees. In the year 1717, Farrukh Siyar gave a royal firman which has given the right to East India Company to do customs free trade in these three regions, for an annual rental of a mere 10,000 rupees. In the sense, what is this customs free trade? The East India Company need not pay any tax for trade in these three regions. This can be a potential question. What are those three regions? Bengal, Gujarat and Deccan. East India Company can export and import any goods without paying any tax. It has to pay only 10,000 rupees per year, an annual rent, to this Mughal Emperor Farrukh Siyar in 1717. This royal firman has empowered the East India Company to issue dastaks, also called as trade passes. Dastaks also called as trade passes. These dastaks have been misutilized by East India Company. That was a huge revenue loss to the Mughal Emperor. As we have seen, the East India Company has its own army, and it started employing even Indians also in its own army, and it has used its army extensively for political purposes by interfering in the internal matters of subcontinent by playing one ruler against the other. So there are many such incidents which finally misuse of dastaks, using army for political purposes, interfering in the internal affairs of the subcontinent, playing one ruler against other, and there are few other incidents which finally led to a decisive event called as Battle of Plassey. 1757 Battle of Plassey. This was a battle between East India Company and Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowlah. I'll provide you the slides, do not worry. I'll first explain this and then give you the slides, so that firstly listen and then you can make a note of that is displayed on the slide, on the screen. So the East India Company was led by Robert Clive, and Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowlah. Mir Jafar, the Senapati of Nawab of Bengal, he colluded with East India Company. As a result, Battle of Plassey was won by East India Company. East India Company could have easily conquered Bengal because it won the Battle of Plassey. The Nawab of Bengal lost the war, but East India Company didn't dare to conquer the Bengal. It feared the backlash from British Parliament, because British Parliament was looking at East India Company with a suspicious eye, because East India Company entered India for the purpose of trading, and now they have territorial ambitions. They wanted to become territorial powers, and these ambitions and passion have been seen suspiciously by the British Parliament over East India Company. Hence, East India Company didn't dare actually to conquer Bengal. Instead, it has placed Mir Jafar on the throne. Mir Jafar, the British puppet, was placed on the throne, and East India Company started ruling Bengal through Mir Jafar. So the Battle of Plassey was considered as a decisive event because it laid the foundations of British Empire in India. It laid the foundations of British Empire in India. Tomorrow in the exam there can be a potential question: which of the following battles has led to the foundation of British Empire in India? It is Battle of Plassey, which happened in 1757, which occurred in 1757. 1757, the Battle of Plassey was a decisive event because it laid the foundation of British Empire in India. It was nothing but indirect East India Company rule. Why it is indirect? Because Mir Jafar was placed on the throne and East India Company started ruling Bengal indirectly through Mir Jafar, as Mir Jafar is a puppet of the British. Now Mir Jafar, after conceding certain territories and a huge amount of money as that battle loss, he thought of becoming independent, but East India Company did not let that happen. He was removed and Mir Qasim was placed on the throne. Mir Qasim was placed on the throne. This guy also, after being put on the throne, he wanted to become independent, hence he was also removed, and again Mir Jafar was placed on the throne. And now Mir Qasim, along with Mir Qasim, who is he? Nawab of Bengal, along with Nawab of Awadh and Mughal Emperor, he formed an alliance called as Tripartite Alliance. He formed an alliance called as Tripartite Alliance. Tripartite Alliance. So Mir Qasim, Nawab of Bengal, Shujauddin, Nawab of Awadh, and Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. Shah Alam II. These three formed an alliance called as Tripartite Alliance and waged a war against East India Company, and that battle is known as Battle of Buxar in the year 1764. 1764 Battle of Buxar. This was also won by East India Company, which was led by Hector Munro. Hector Munro. So the Battle of Buxar was between East India Company and a Tripartite Alliance. East India Company led by Hector Munro, the military leader, and the Tripartite Alliance consisted of Mir Qasim, Shujauddin and Shah Alam II. This also was won by East India Company. And this resulted in a treaty called as Allahabad Treaty. Allahabad Treaty was a result of Battle of Buxar in the year 1765. As the Nawab of Bengal had lost the Battle of Buxar, he surrendered the Diwani rights. He surrendered the Diwani rights. To whom? To East India Company. He surrendered the Diwani rights to East India Company. What is this Diwani rights? What is this Diwani rights? Rights over revenue and civil justice is called as Diwani rights. Rights over revenue and civil justice is called Diwani rights, and these rights were with East India Company, and Nizamat rights were retained by Nawab according to this treaty. So according to the Allahabad Treaty, there was a division of administration. There was division of administration into Diwani rights and Nizamat rights. Diwani administration and Nizamat administration. Diwani administration is about collection of revenue and civil justice. What is Diwani administration? Collection of revenue and administration of civil justice. What is Nizamat administration? Nizamat administration is maintenance of law and order and administration of criminal justice. So maintenance of law and order and administration of criminal justice is Nizamat administration. Administration of civil justice and collection of revenue is Diwani administration. So there was a division of administration by Robert Clive, the then governor. So this is called as dual administration or dual government. Remember this, dual government in the year 1765 by Robert Clive. By Robert Clive. What is this dual government? Diwani administration and Nizamat administration. Diwani administration is collection of land revenue and administration of civil justice. It is with East India Company. Nizamat administration was retained by the Nawab of Bengal, which was maintenance of law and order and administration of criminal justice. If you closely observe, firstly, even after winning the battle, still it did not totally conquer Bengal. It in a sense East India Company. East India Company has taken over only Diwani rights, and still the Nawab of Bengal was given Nizamat rights. Now, closely observing, the rights that have been given to Nizamat, they include expenditure part. So those are that administration which is associated with expenditure has been given to Nawab, and that administration which results in earning income was kept in the hands of East India Company. Such cruel and cunning company body is East India Company. And this dual government carried out till 1772. This dual government carried out till 1772, 1765 to 1772, dual government. Warren Hastings became governor of Bengal in the year 1772, and he has abolished the dual government. He has abolished the dual government and totally conquered Bengal. Now, if you see where they have started and where they have landed, from traders to territorial powers, from traders to territorial powers. See, evolution of Indian Constitution or historical background of Indian Constitution. If you take any material available in the market, it starts with Regulating Act 1773, and no material speaks about the events that led to Regulating Act 1773. Arvind Academy has taken up an initiative to provide you all the information required, though it doesn't come under the exam. This all thing actually is to be taught, will be taught by Shekhar sir in the history classes in Arvind Academy, but still I wanted to give you enough information so that you have that historical background chapter very clear in your mind, right? So from traders to territorial powers, 1772, finally Warren Hastings becoming governor of Bengal, he abolished the dual government and totally conquered the Bengal. So this is how the East India Company from traders had become territorial powers. So let us have a recap. Firstly, let us have a recap. So the historical background of Indian Constitution implies development of Indian Constitution starting from Regulating Act of 1773 till the time when the Constitution of India came into effect. It came into effect on 26th January 1950. So as we have discussed, the historical background of Indian Constitution was nothing but the developments between 1773 Regulating Act and commencement of Constitution 26 January 1950. So this is the advent of Europeans. This is the advent of Europeans. Vasco da Gama in the year 1498 AD, a Portuguese explorer, discovered sea route to India from Europe via Atlantic Ocean. He arrived at Calicut, Malabar coast. The local ruler King Jammurin welcomed him. In 1500 AD, the Portuguese company, so this is again important, 1500 AD, Portuguese company. What's the name of the company? I told you, Estrada da India. It established its first settlement where? In Calicut. For what purpose? For doing trade with India. So these facts are very important, very important. This can be potential questions. Please note down the years, everything. The first governor of Portuguese company was Francisco de Almeida. This is also important. Francisco de Almeida. And he followed a policy known as Blue Water Policy, which means that controlling Indian Ocean. Please make a note of everything. Let's get to the next slide. I am just making a recap of whatever I have told you so far about this historical background of Indian Constitution. So Portuguese traders earned enormous profits by selling their merchandise in India. Motivated by Portuguese company success, a group of English merchants known as merchant adventurers, in 1599 AD. So East India Company was formed in the year 1599 AD. In the year 1600, East India Company got a royal charter. 1600 AD, got a royal charter from British monarch Queen Elizabeth I to trade with the East. Therefore, East India Company had the exclusive right. That's what I termed it as trade monopoly. Under the charter granted by Queen Elizabeth I. Therefore, British came to India in 1600 AD as traders in the form of East India Company. Look at the settlements. In the year 1608, first settlement established in Surat. What did I tell you? The settlement is called as trade point of transit. The settlement in Surat was called as trade point of transit. In the year 1610, East India Company factory was established in Machilipatnam, which was on Coromandel coast. In the year 1612, again an important year, Sir Thomas Roe, an ambassador to the court of Mughal Emperor Jahangir, was successful in securing exclusive rights to reside and set up factories in Surat, and these rights were granted by Jahangir. Granted by Jahangir. Sir Thomas Roe, 1612. Therefore, East India Company got a territorial base. All these I have explained it to you. I have explained it to you, everything, and now that I am just making a recap, and hence I am actually reading it out. Right? So, it finally got a territorial base. So, from traders to territorial base. Slowly, East India Company became dominant, established trading posts in Madras, Bombay and Calcutta, which I called it as chief factories or chief settlements. And these chief settlements later were converted into headquarters, and a governor has been appointed for each headquarter, and governor was given the right to make rules, laws, ordinances for good governance of those territories. And these chief settlements became walled forts. Example, Fort St. George in Madras, remember the year, in 1639. So when was the Fort St. George built? It was built in 1639 in Madras by East India Company, because it was a chief settlement, chief factory. And then Fort William in the year 1696. So when was Fort William constructed? In the year 1696. See, these are the like kind of forts. Trading, this is the coast. So this is the coast, and this is how the trading took place, and the building of ports. These are known as settlements. Now you got me? These are known as settlements. These are also called as factories, trading centers, right? So let's move to the next slide. So gradually, East India Company gained rights to acquire territory. So it started acquiring territory. How? Because it used to indulge in wars, it used to make treaties, and then it used to gain territories. So we have seen those charters also. 1628 charter, 1638 charter, 1669 charter, 1677 charter and 1726 charter. You know, making East India Company gradually powerful. Those charters have given East India Company the powers gradually more and more. So they started minting money by the 1677 charter, minting money 1677 charter, and in the year 1677 charter, and then Port of Bombay was entrusted in the year 1669 by the 1669 Royal Charter. They started maintaining troops, forming alliances, indulge in wars. Example, Carnatic War. Carnatic War. A brief explanation, a detailed explanation about Carnatic War would be given to you in the history classes in modern India. So do not worry, but make a link. So Carnatic War, and whatever territories have been acquired, the British East India Company used to exercise their own laws in their acquired territories. The territories in India, the territories were there in India, but the laws that were applied in those territories were not of India, but they were of British. So British laws were expressly introduced in the acquired territories. Even in the three presidencies, Bombay High Court, Bombay, Madras and Calcutta, in these three presidencies, even three mayor courts were also established. So British laws were expressly introduced in the acquired territories in India. So East India Company's powers finally greatly enhanced because they have territories, they're minting their own money, they have troops, they have army, they are forming alliances, they are indulging in wars, getting into treaties, acquiring territories, and then exercising their own rules in those acquired territories. However, those rules should not be to the contrary of British laws. So British Parliament makes certain laws, and within the framework of those laws itself, East India Company here have to make rules and regulations. So that's the condition. So indirectly, the British started exercising power over India through a company called as East India Company, which came to India for trading purpose, and unfortunately they ended up becoming territorial powers, rulers. So in the year 1717, Farrukh Siyar, Mughal emperor, he issued a royal firman, charter, which said East India Company could carry out customs free trade from Bengal, Gujarat and Deccan. As I told you, this can be a potential question. So in which of the following regions East India Company carried out customs free trade according to a royal charter issued by Farrukh Siyar? So A, Bengal, B, Gujarat, C, Deccan, D, all of the above. So answer would be all of the above. Again a potential question for group 2, group 1 and even for civils also. So East India Company was allowed to trade, to do the customs free trade. Customs free trade for an annual payment of 10,000 rupees. For an annual payment of 10,000 rupees to the Emperor Farrukh Siyar. A very low amount. Export and import of British goods in those three regions. Export and import of British goods in the three regions without paying tax. Without paying tax. So under the Farman, East India Company was authorized to issue the dastaks, which are also called as passes, for the transportation of goods. So the East India Company, after establishing firmly on the front of commerce, so they were dominant in the front of commerce and trade. So in the area of trade and commerce, they became very dominant. So as traders, they are dominant. They have their armies, and that is advanced. They have money, they have territories, they have the backing of British Parliament. And importantly, in India parallelly, there was a disintegration of Mughal Empire. The disintegration of Mughal Empire after the death of Aurangzeb in 1707 has actually weakened the central administration, and this in fact has added advantage for the East India Company to expand its power and wings. So East India Company was also employing Indians in its army. This army was used extensively for political purposes. As I told you, this army became a major force in India and was used extensively by East India Company for political purposes. What is that? In the internal politics of the subcontinent, yes, East India Company interfered. As I told you, Carnatic affairs. The bright example is Carnatic affairs. Carnatic War, sorry. Carnatic Wars. This Carnatic War actually fought between French versus British, but the British actually sided the Nawab of Carnatic. So by playing one ruler against the other, it interfered in the internal politics as it had army. So there are many reasons apart from this. There is a tragedy also which led to Battle of Plassey. Which led to Battle of Plassey in the year 1757. That was between East India Company and Nawab of Bengal. Nawab of Bengal. So East India Company was led by Robert Clive. Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dawla. So Mughal Emperor Alamgir II was ruling the empire when the Battle of Plassey had taken place. So Robert Clive, the head of the East India Company, and Siraj-ud-Dawla, the Nawab of Bengal. East India Company won the battle. East India Company won the battle. Mir Jafar, Senapati of Nawab and puppet of British, was placed on the throne. So as I told you, after winning the Battle of Plassey, the East India Company did not dare to conquer the Bengal. Instead, it wanted to rule Bengal indirectly by placing Mir Jafar, who was the puppet of the British. But after being placed on the throne, he wanted to become independent after conceding few territories and then huge money as a battle, as war indemnity. I think as war indemnity, huge money was paid to East India Company, and then he conceded 24 Parganas districts and few other areas to the East India Company, and then he expected certain independence and autonomy, which was denied by East India Company. Hence, he was removed from the throne, and then Mir Qasim was placed on the throne. Mir Qasim did the same thing. Mir Qasim was removed, and then again Mir Jafar was placed on the throne, and then now Mir Qasim. So, the Battle of Plassey laid foundation of British Empire in India. Very important. Which of the following battles has laid foundation of British Empire in India? It is Battle of Plassey in the year 1757. And as I told you, Mir Qasim, Shujauddin, and then Shah Alam II formed an alliance called as Tripartite Alliance and waged a war against East India Company under the military leader Hector Munro in a battle called as Battle of Buxar in the year 1764, and they ended up on the losing side. Battle of Buxar. So Battle of Buxar was fought between the forces under the command of the British East India Company led by Hector Munro and the combined armies of Mir Qasim, Nawab of Bengal, Shujauddawla, the Nawab of Awadh, and the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. So Tripartite Alliance, very important. So Battle of Buxar in the year 1764, Tripartite Alliance versus East India Company led by Hector Munro or Munro. So who were under this Tripartite Alliance? Mir Qasim, Shujauddawla, and Shah Alam II. So earlier I think I said Shujauddin. No, it is Shujauddawla. So Mir Qasim, who was the Nawab of Bengal, Shujauddawla, who was Nawab of Awadh, and Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. These three formed an alliance called as Tripartite Alliance and waged a war against East India Company in the battle called as Battle of Buxar. East India Company was led by the military ruler Hector Munro. So the battle resulted in the Treaty of Allahabad in the year 1765, in which the Mughal Emperor surrendered sovereignty of Bengal to the British. He has given away the Diwani rights. Diwani administration. I told you, no? Allahabad Treaty 1765, it led to called as dual government. What is this dual government? Diwani administration and Nizamat administration. Diwani administration and Nizamat administration. Diwani administration is about collection of land revenue and administration of civil justice, and it was with East India Company because it is income earning administration. And Nizamat administration, which was nothing but maintenance of law order and administration of criminal justice, so nothing but expenditure part of the administration, and it was given or retained by the Nawab of Bengal. and this was in the year 1765 and till 1772. So East India Company rule effectively started with the Battle of Buxar. So again a potential question. So East India Company in the year 1757, that was an indirect rule. That was an indirect rule. So Mir Jafar actually was the one who actually ruled, though on the advice, on the conditions, terms and conditions laid by the British, laid by the East India Company. But in the year 1764, the Diwani administration is in the hands of, in the year 1764, Diwani administration was in the hands of East India Company. So the East India Company effectively started its rule. Effectively started its rule when the Nawab of Bengal surrendered Diwani rights. What is Diwani rights? Rights over revenue and civil justice of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. Diwani rights of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa to the East India Company, and Robert Clive, who was the governor, then governor of the East India Company, he had, to the East India Company and Robert Clive. So the Diwani rights were with East India Company and Robert Clive was the governor then. Nizamat administration, as I told you, was in the hands of, so Nizamat administration, the Battle of Buxar ended with Allahabad Treaty 1765. The treaty says division of administration. So I have explained it to you. Division of administration into Diwani administration and Nizamat administration. This new setup was called as dual government. This new setup was called as dual government. So from 1765 till 1772, this dual government existed. And this dual government has brought many challenges, because of which in the year 1772, Warren Hastings became the governor of Bengal. Warren Hastings became the governor of Bengal, and he ended this dual government and by totally conquering the Bengal. So who has started this dual administration? Robert Clive. This dual government was started by Robert Clive and ended by Warren Hastings, 1765 to 1772. 1765 to 1772. So Nizamat administration is law and order, maintenance of law and order, headed by Nawabs, which means the judicial functions given to the Nawab of Bengal. So East India Company was given the rights of Diwani, land revenue, and the law and order was given to Nawab of Bengal, which was an expenditure side. Therefore, the East India Company started its career as a territorial power. So, trader to having territorial base to becoming a territorial power, nothing but ruler. So by the Battle of Buxar, the East India Company effectively started ruling Bengal and became territorial power, from trade to territorial power. In 1772, as I told you, Warren Hastings became governor and he ended the dual government by totally conquering Bengal in 1772. And now, this is important, make a note of it. So 1600 to 1765, Battle of Buxar. Till then, only trading functions. And from 1765 to 1772, Diwani rights, that is revenue collection, which is a revenue earning administration. 1773, I told you, an act was established by the parliament. Which parliament? Not Indian parliament, by the British parliament. An act was established by the British parliament to control East India Company in India. If you see, I just told you, the British parliament back there in England had been watching East India Company's territorial ambitions, and hence it was always suspicious about the motives of East India Company, and it wanted to control East India Company. After all, who wanted to give away the territorial powers to a small private company? Small in the sense in front of a country, of course it's small. So it's the British Parliament was observing very keenly with a suspicious eye about the activities of East India Company in India. And when East India Company had conquered Bengal, the British Parliament had passed a law known as 1773 Regulating Act. And this act, under this act or through this act, British Parliament will control East India Company, will regulate the activities of East India Company in India. Thereby, it is not that East India Company had ruled India, but it is the British had ruled India through East India Company in the form of Regulating Acts, Charter Acts and Government of India Acts. So from 1773 to 1858, that is indirect rule of British government. Why? Because it was through East India Company. After Sepoy Mutiny, 1858 Act was passed, and the territories which were called as British possessions in India, they were directly coming under the British Crown since 1858. Hence, 1858 to 1947 British direct rule, that we will discuss it in the later classes, don't worry. So now, since 1773, as I told you, the British government had taken steps to control and regulate the affairs of East India Company in India. What? Control and regulate. Since 1773 through Regulating Act 1773. So in 1773 an act was passed by Parliament, and this act will control the East India Company, and it will also regulate the affairs of East India Company in India. So the first step taken by the British Parliament to control East India Company and to regulate its activities in India was Regulating Act 1773. I am again repeating, the first step taken by the British Parliament to control and regulate East India Company affairs in India was Regulating Act 1773. So the British started ruling India by laws that are being made in British Parliament through East India Company, and hence we call it as indirect rule of British government, and that was till 1858 or till Sepoy Mutiny 1857. This Regulating Act 1773 is very important. It is in fact called as a landmark legislation. I have used this word, landmark legislation. So I have used this act named 1773 Regulating Act as 1773 Regulating Act. It is a landmark legislation. Why? Why is it a landmark legislation? Because it was the first step taken by the British to control and regulate the affairs of East India Company. Regulation control and regulation of the affairs of East India Company. Number 2, for the first time, the political and administrative functions of the company have been determined. The political and administrative functions of East India Company have been determined. For the very first time, the British Parliament has realized that the functions of East India Company have been categorized into political and administrative. So for the first time, this regulating act has determined the political functions of East India Company and administrative functions of East India Company. Number 3, Warren Hastings was the governor of Bengal who ended the dual government in 1772 by totally conquering the Bengal. Right? In the year 1773, by the Regulating Act 1773, by this Regulating Act of 1773, the governor of Bengal was made the Governor General of Bengal and has brought the other two presidencies, Bombay and Madras, under his jurisdiction, in the sense that the governors of Bombay and Madras were made subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal. And who was the first Governor General of Bengal? Warren Hastings. So, Governor of Bengal was made Governor General of Bengal. It actually laid the foundations for central administration. The foundation for central administration in India was 1773 Regulating Act. How? The Governor of Bengal had been made the Governor General of Bengal, and the other governors of Bombay and Madras have been made subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal, resulting in the centralized administration. So 1773 Regulation Act, 1773 Regulating Act is a landmark legislation for these three purposes. What is the first one? First step taken by the British Parliament to control and regulate the affairs of East India Company was through Regulating Act 1773, and it has determined the functions of East India Company as political and administrative. And also the Governor of Bengal has been made Governor General of Bengal. Warren Hastings is the first Governor General of Bengal. This can be also a question. Who is the Governor General of Bengal? Warren Hastings is the first Governor General of Bengal in the year 1773. So 1773 Regulating Act has brought several administrative reforms, and this conversion of Governor of Bengal into Governor General of Bengal is a major administrative reform brought by Regulating Act 1773. After 1773 Regulating Act, several acts have been passed by the British Parliament, especially every act after every 20 years. So 1773 Regulating Act, and thereafter 1793 Act, and thereafter 1813, and thereafter 1833, and thereafter 1853. But because of Sepoy Mutiny, 1858 Act, and then 1861 Act, and then 1892 Act, 1909 Act, 1919 Act, 1935 Act, and 1947 India Independence Act. These acts were nothing but historical background of Indian Constitution. So several regulating acts, several charter acts, several Government of India acts have been passed since 1773, and the study of those acts was historical background of India, historical background of Indian Constitution. and those laws are nothing but they are a legal framework. The acts which I have told you, regulating acts, charter acts, government of India acts, they are nothing but they are a legal framework for the administration, for the organization and functioning of government and administration in India. So government and administration in India, its organization and functioning have a legal framework in the form of regulating acts, charter acts, government of India acts, which were framed by the British Parliament back in England. So the India was ruled by such acts passed by the British Parliament, who were the representatives of British. Hence, India was under British rule. That's why we say India was under British rule. Right? So, regarding these regulating acts, charter acts and government of India acts, which are nothing but historical background of Indian constitution, that those acts, provisions, the points, everything about those acts we are going to study in the next class. Thank you.